Evelyn was known as the strictest HOA board member in the neighborhood, a woman whose reputation carried more weight than the written bylaws themselves, and her sharp gaze could silence even the boldest homeowners who dared to let their grass grow too long or their shutters fade in color. But the order she protected so fiercely began to tremble the day Daniel moved into the community, for Daniel was not like the compliant residents who nodded politely and repainted their fences at her first notice. He was confident, stubborn, and carried a rebellious spark that seemed determined to clash with her authority, and their first encounter was over something so small yet unforgettable, the shade of navy he painted his mailbox, a color that was not on the HOA's approved palette of whites and grays, and when she arrived clipboard in hand, ready to lecture him on conformity, he met her words with a crooked smile and a calm voice that told her he would not be bullied into sameness, and instead of apologizing he remarked that he liked his home to reflect his individuality, that he preferred to live boldly rather than fade into the background, and though his defiance infuriated Evelyn, deep inside it stirred something she did not want to name, because where she expected hostility or fear, she found charm, and where she demanded compliance, she discovered resistance laced with warmth, and in the days that followed their paths crossed again and again, for Daniel seemed almost eager to push the boundaries she enforced, planting wildflowers in his yard that stretched beyond neat lines, inviting neighbors to admire the splash of colors that broke the monotony of sterile lawns, and each time Evelyn confronted him with her firm tone, he disarmed her with stories, with laughter, with a perspective that challenged her rigid views, and although she told herself she despised him, her heart betrayed her with quickened beats whenever his name appeared on an agenda or whenever she found herself rehearsing what she would say to him next, and soon she began to realize that her anger was not the only emotion at play, that hidden beneath the surface of their battles was a growing curiosity, even an attraction that unsettled her more than any violation of HOA policy ever could, and late at night when she sat alone reviewing paperwork, she found her mind drifting to his smile, his voice, the way he stood tall against her authority, and she wondered if the rules she lived by had become a prison rather than protection, and if Daniel, with his stubborn defiance, was slowly offering her a key to freedom she never dared to seek. She told herself repeatedly that Daniel was nothing more than a nuisance, a stubborn thorn in her perfectly cultivated garden of order, yet every time she marched to his door ready to deliver another warning she found her resolve wavering, because he would answer not with hostility but with a glint in his eye and words that slid past her defenses, like the time he invited her to step into his yard and see the wildflowers up close, explaining how they reminded him of summers in his childhood home, or when he laughed and told her that perfection was boring and life was meant to be messy, and though she rolled her eyes and scribbled notes on her clipboard, something inside her softened in ways she could not control, for Daniel's presence forced her to question not only the rules of the HOA but the rules of her own heart, rules she had built after years of solitude, after heartbreaks she never admitted to anyone, and after countless nights convincing herself that discipline was the same as strength. But standing in front of him she felt exposed, her carefully layered armor peeling away with every word he spoke, and soon her colleagues on the board began to notice her hesitation, whispering among themselves about why Evelyn's tone seemed less sharp with Daniel, why violations that once warranted heavy fines now ended in warnings or delays, and though she denied it fiercely, the truth was undeniable even to her, that she had begun to anticipate his presence, to look forward to their clashes as though they were dances choreographed in passion rather than battles fought over paint and plants, and one evening when she saw him helping an elderly neighbor repair a broken fence, his shirt streaked with sweat and his laughter ringing across the cul-de-sac, she felt something stir within her chest so deeply that she had to turn away before anyone noticed the flush rising in her cheeks, for she knew she was slipping into dangerous territory, the kind of territory that threatened her reputation, her control, and perhaps even the very identity she had built. Yet the pull toward him grew stronger every day, weaving through her thoughts at board meetings, invading her dreams at night, and leaving her wondering if the woman she had become, the enforcer of order, the guardian of sameness, was nothing more than a mask she had worn for too long, and Daniel, with his defiance and his warmth, was the only one who dared to look beneath it, daring her to step into a world of color, chaos, and feeling that she had locked away for years. The change within Evelyn became undeniable the night she caught herself standing outside Daniel's home long after a routine patrol had ended, her eyes drawn to the warm glow of his windows and the faint sound of music drifting into the quiet street, and she wondered, with a pang that cut deeper than she expected, what it would feel like to step inside, to leave behind her clipboard and her authority and simply exist in his presence without the shield of rules between them. And when Daniel opened the door unexpectedly, as if sensing her there, he didn't tease her as he usually did, but instead invited her in with a softness that disarmed her completely, offering her a mug of tea and listening as though her words carried more weight than the laws she enforced. And for the first time in years Evelyn spoke not as the head of the HOA but as a woman, sharing fragments of her life, the loneliness of always being the one people feared, the emptiness of carrying respect without affection, and though she cursed herself later for revealing so much, Daniel never used her vulnerability against her. Instead he met it with his own, telling her about his late mother and how the strict, colorless communities she had endured had always made her unhappy, how he vowed never to let conformity smother the joys she taught him to cherish, and Evelyn realized in that moment that their battles had never been about fences or flowers, but about two people fighting for pieces of themselves, hers hidden in discipline, his blazing in defiance. And though the board meetings grew heavier with whispers and suspicions, Evelyn could no longer deny the spark that pulled her to Daniel's side, a spark that made her linger at his door when she should have walked away, a spark that made her question whether love could exist in the very space where rules were meant to suffocate it. And when their eyes locked across the meeting room one evening, a silence stretched between them so thick that every member present felt it, and Evelyn knew her life had shifted irreversibly. For no matter how much she tried to bury her feelings under policies and punishments, Daniel had awakened something in her that she could not return to sleep, something wild, unrestrained, and terrifyingly beautiful, leaving her standing on the edge of a choice she had never imagined she would face, between the order she had always clung to, and the man who had shown her that sometimes the greatest harmony was found not in perfection but in the courage to love amidst imperfection. Daniel's resistance to the HOA's rules did not fade, but what changed slowly was the way Evelyn began to see those rules through his eyes, for when he explained that the wildflowers banned for being too bright actually reminded him of his late mother's garden, or when he told her that the Navy mailbox she had condemned made his small house feel personal and alive, she realized the community she had fought to preserve with rigid uniformity might never have truly been alive at all. And in those late-night conversations by his porch, where the world seemed quieter and her clipboard lay forgotten, she felt her convictions unravel thread by thread, until she no longer saw him as a nuisance but as a mirror reflecting her own hidden desires, the parts of herself she had buried under the weight of order. And though she tried to resist the pull, every shared laugh, every brush of his hand when passing a cup of tea, deepened the bond that neither of them could deny. But while their private world grew closer, the whispers in the community grew louder, for neighbors had sharp eyes and sharper tongues, and soon the board began to suspect that Evelyn's impartiality had been compromised, questioning why Daniel's fines were delayed or dismissed, why his untrimmed lawn remained untouched while others were penalized, and the pressure mounted until one evening she found herself cornered in a board meeting, faced with accusations wrapped in polite words, as colleagues demanded an explanation, and she realized with a pang that the very role which had given her identity was now shackling her heart, for she could not both uphold the mask of perfect authority and love Daniel with the openness he deserved. And Daniel, sensing her turmoil, told her gently that he never wished to destroy her world, only to show her that rules without compassion were prisons. And his words struck deep because she knew he was right, that all her years of clinging to regulations had been less about community harmony and more about keeping herself untouchable, safe from hurt. But here was a man who had shattered that safety and yet made her feel more alive than she had in decades. And as the board pushed harder, demanding she step down or prove her loyalty through harsher enforcement, she realized she stood at a crossroads, one road leading back to the cold safety of rules and the other toward the frightening warmth of love. And when she looked into Daniel's eyes she saw not defiance but a promise that life beyond conformity could still be beautiful, even sustainable. And so with a trembling voice she made her choice, resigning from her post in a meeting so silent that her words seemed to echo for hours. And though it felt like stepping off a cliff, Daniel's hand was there to steady her, his presence a reminder that sometimes order is not about sameness but about balance. And in the months that followed the community changed too, slowly, reluctantly, as neighbors realized that color in the gardens did not bring chaos but joy, that individuality did not fracture harmony but added to it, and Evelyn, no longer the icy enforcer but simply a woman in love, discovered a freedom she had denied herself for years, learning that love and rules did not have to be enemies but could coexist if tempered with respect. And when she walked with Daniel through the blooming wildflowers one bright afternoon, Hearing the laughter of children chasing butterflies across lawns that were no longer identical, she knew that she had not betrayed the community by following her heart, she had saved it, because the true foundation of any neighborhood was not paint codes or strict fines but the courage of its people to embrace both order and individuality, to find balance between conformity and expression, and most of all to love without fear. And so Evelyn's story, once written in rigid lines of regulations, was rewritten in colors she had never dared to see before, each shade a reminder that the rules she once clung to were never meant to silence life but to guide it, and that when love enters the equation, even the strictest boundaries can bend without breaking, leaving behind not chaos but a stronger, truer harmony, where hearts beat freely and still in rhythm, a melody of order and freedom blended into something lasting, something beautiful, something that finally felt like home.